We're back here, Larry. We've got the phone blowing up. I've just returned, many people might have seen, from NYU Langone Medical Center. I was there, Larry, investigating this coronavirus outbreak, looking for patients. You've just filed a class action lawsuit against the Chinese government. What can you tell us about the action?
Well, people should go to freedomwatchusa.org. That's freedomwatchusa.org. That's our website. You can see the complaint. You can sign up to be a possible class action plaintiff. You can join our Justice League and get our free newsletters, etc. if you give us your information. Street address is optional. You give us your email address and telephone number, whatever you want, and join the fight, because it's going to be a very costly fight. Let me tell you what it is. China, through its laboratories in Wuhan, China, they have a biomedical military facility there, developed a biological weapon. That was COVID-19. That helps explain why it mutates when it goes from one person to the next. Now, either negligently or by design, that escaped from that facility. Biological weapons, of course, are a weapon of mass destruction. They're, of course, in effect, a terrorist weapon. They're outlawed by international treaty and convention, including treaties and conventions that China has signed on to. So as a result, they have no legal immunity from suit. Now, China has trillions of dollars in assets in this country invested in banks, securities, CDs, other means of storing their money in the United States, because until this destabilization of our economy, we were the most secure place to store it. I might add the stock market just a few minutes ago went into the 1800s. Everything that was gained during the Trump administration with the stock market is now lost and more.
Wow.
China's responsible for this damage. And why is it? And I heard the president just a few minutes ago say, we don't hold China accountable. Well, no, it needs to be held accountable. When you're emptying out the coffers of the U.S. Treasury, which is our money, taxpayer money, and you're going to be paid trillions of dollars for a bailout so you can get reelected. And I love the president, but you know what? That's what this is in part. He's buying reelection. We're going to bankrupt this country now for decades and decades into the future. Our kids and grandchildren will be living in abject poverty if this goes through. So China should have to pay. And that's the purpose for this lawsuit, because we've asked now for in excess of $21 trillion. That would almost cover our national debt before the latest crisis. And there's no reason why they shouldn't pay. They're not immune. The money's here to collect. Dallas Morning News, which is very leftist, I've sued them for my brave client, Dimitri Penny, wrote an article a few minutes ago which said that we'll never collect. Well, they're angry because I sued them for their defamation. They're part of the left-wing media. We have a left-wing media task force at Freedom Watch as well. But I want people to go there and sign up for this class action suit, to donate with tax-deductible contributions. This case is bigger than Larry Klayman. I'm going to have to enlist lawyers throughout the country. Some of them are going to have to pay. I hope we'll get volunteers, but that's going to be very costly. So contribute to Freedom Watch with tax-deductible contributions. There is no reason why the American taxpayer, why you and your loved one should have to foot the bill when China is the one that's responsible for this. And think about what the president said in 2016 when he was running for president. He asked the question, and it was correct. Why is it that the American taxpayer should have to pay for the liberation of the Iraqi people and also in Afghanistan? Why aren't we using oil proceeds from Iraq and the Middle East to pay for that? Of course, that never happened. Now, ask the same question. Why do we have to pay for that?
In the case of Iraq, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, isn't it a little bit like you get mugged? You beat the crap out of the mugger, and then he wants you to pay for the medical bills. Like, we asking Iraq to pay, we kind of destroyed their country, didn't we?
Well, you can say we destroyed their country. I'll leave that up for many people to decide. I don't think the country was, worth saving in any event. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, okay, this may sound however you want to take it. I wouldn't risk one American life for an Arab or Muslim life in that country. I would not. I'm sorry. We take care of our own people. Let them take care of themselves. So I agree with you in that respect, Jason. but I don't think that we're responsible for the damage we did to that country. Saddam Hussein was doing stuff to try to harm us. Despite the fact that Bush and Cheney, and this kind of fits into what the Chinese did, developed the anthrax that was used against us after 9/11. It came out of a lab in Virginia, and Bush the dad and Cheney and Rumsfeld gave it to Saddam Hussein to use against Iran. Despite that, Saddam Hussein, was no friend of the United States, regardless, even if it would be better that he was still in power today.
It's an interesting topic to explore momentarily. I mean, we're a bit off on a tangent, but this anthrax situation is interesting because I agree with you. There is a lot of evidence that it was created in a weaponized form of anthrax created at a United States bioweapons laboratory, which of course, as you've described, is illegal for us to use as well. There's a big controversy about the vaccine that was created for service members. You represent many families. We met the Strange family whose son was horrendously killed in the Extortion 17 disaster. A lot of veterans that I speak to talk about this vaccine that Desert Storm veterans were forced to take. Don't you think, Larry, that there's a danger now they're going to introduce some COVID-19 vaccine and potentially even force Americans to take this vaccine? What's our legal protection if the government decides that there's a mandatory vaccine that we have to take?
Well, as of today, the president, frankly, and I love the president, but I'll tell you something, Jason. Every time he talks, the stock market sinks. He should stop talking, acting more presidential, not make predictions. Everything's going to be okay. You don't have to say it one way or the other. We got to deal with things right now. And as far as the vaccine's concerned, he said he's going to declare a state of war. I think that would be a mistake. And he could force people to take that vaccine.
Wow.
And it is an issue. Now, I would suggest tongue in cheek, because I heard when I was watching earlier today that apparently it's working with small animals like rats and mice.
Vaccine is.
No analogy intended. I think if we do some human trials, we should first try it on Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. I think they should be the ones that test it out.
I agree with you on that. So let me try to wrap my brain around this. So if Donald Trump comes out with a press conference and says, hey, this is an unprecedented situation. We're actually declaring war on the virus to enable some presidential power. And by the way, you now have to take this vaccine. What if we refuse? I don't want a vaccine against COVID-19.
Well, we could be locked up or quarantined. I saw a meme recently that came out, or a meme, however you call it. I speak French, so I say meme, which says, could be worse. You could be quarantined with Rashida Tlaib.
Yeah, you said that to me.
Potentially, he could quarantine us without throwing us in prison, but they would probably put us in concentration camps around the country. It's an untenable situation, and I blame, and there is blame here, and the president's reelection is seriously at risk now, because you tend to blame the person in power.
Right.
I'm not blaming him, but I'll tell you, the blame goes back to George W. Bush, to Barack Obama, and to this president, because they have not adequately prepared. Regrettably, some of the leftist hacks that are attacking him for this are partially right. We knew after 9/11 that we would likely be hit with a biological attack. We knew that. And yet we've done little to nothing in the last 19 years to prepare for that. And this is a tragedy. Instead, we get wrapped up in witch hunts, and the Democrats bear responsibility for this. Witch hunts involving the Soviet Union, which is now known as Russia, Ukraine, impeachments, convictions, and everything else. Now, I'm religious, and I'll say this straight up, and maybe, people will attack me for this, but I don't care. I think God is sending us a message. I think this is payback to some extent. He cleaned house several times in the Bible. He may be cleaning house because of our degradation as a society. And frankly, we're getting our comeuppance right now. But I'll tell you something. There are a lot of innocent people out there in this country, and they're dying because of what these politicians have done over the years. And they're being infected, and they're being frightened, and they're losing their life savings. And who should have to pay for that? The Chinese. I don't hate the Chinese people. The Chinese people are good people, but this government is illegal. This government is criminal. This government needs to pay, and they've got the money to pay it. right in U.S. banks. So that's what we're trying to do. So please go to freedomwatchusa.org. I know I'm, promoting this heavily. It's a hard sell, but I need your support right now because no one's going to do it, Jason. If I may say one other thing, our worthless Attorney General, what's he doing?
Nothing.
Is he hiding under the desk? Why isn't he bringing the case that I just brought yesterday? Why isn't he? And this is, lesser. Why didn't he go after Comey? Why didn't he go after McCabe? Why isn't he going after the Clintons? Why isn't he going after the Obamas? He's scared of his shadow. He's as bad as Jeff Sessions. And the president could order him to bring a case against China. The president could also put bigger tariffs on China and have them pay for this damage rather than going on TV every day, scaring the American people, saying he's going to declare war. The stock market's sinking faster than a rock. And every time he opens his mouth, he makes it worse. Yeah. And I'm saying it straight up, President, I love you, but shut the heck up, okay? Just get the job done. Get it done. Bring a case against China.
Now, Larry,
join me.
Let me ask you something about the case against China. Is there a way to also involve this biolab in Canada? Because we've got the Canadian Broadcasting Company. This is an article from July 14th, 2019, in which they describe an incident where a Chinese researcher is escorted from an infectious disease lab amid this RCMP investigation. Now, the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, are Canada's equivalent of the FBI. This is their national police. This Chinese scientist, whose name Jianggu Kui, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, she was escorted out of the lab for what's been described as a policy breach. Now, that seems like that could be anything from eating a coworker's lunch out of the refrigerator to perhaps bringing a sample of COVID-19 to Wuhan, China. The scientist has traveled there. I think a lot of these viral research labs around the world probably share research and maybe even samples. But there was a follow-up article in October 19 that said that this woman was still under investigation, but we know so little about it. Can you involve this in the suit so we can get discovery from the RCMP?
Well, we hope to get discovery. Look, we know, and we're not blameless either, okay? But we're not blamed for this. Is the United States does biological weapons research. We know that. That's where the anthrax came from. And we know that all countries do that. And it's illegal. It's done covertly. It's done by our CIA. It's done by, dark programs, okay? Now, China was developing this in their lab in Wuhan, China. That's the only bioweapons lab that they
How do we know
in
that?
China. There are various reports. Read the complaint. It's very detailed. There were various admissions, in effect, that were made by China. There were people doctors who died, Chinese doctors. It probably got out by accident, but it got out. So who should have to pay the damage? The Chinese should have to pay the damage. And again, this is not an attack on the Chinese people. Look at the Chinese Americans who have done so many good things for this country, particularly on the West Coast. They built the city of San Francisco, of Los Angeles, of others, the railroads, things like that. That's not about the Chinese people. This is about this government. And what we're saying is pay up. We, the American people, should not have to pay up. We shouldn't have to be getting, Jason, checks in the mail. We shouldn't be having to bail out small business for $50 billion, the airlines for $150 billion. Trillions of dollars just emptying out the account. We're already bankrupt. We're already in the high 20s in terms of national debt. We'll never be able to pay this back. So why do we have to bear the brunt? Why do American workers have to lose their jobs without compensation from the Chinese? Why do small businesses have to get hurt without compensation from the Chinese? President, stop pulling punches here. Now, I understand that maybe a reason for that is that, unfortunately, we got ourselves in a situation where a lot of our medical products are made in China. But we better have a national program right now. Spend your money on that to have the pharmaceutical companies and others bring back the jobs to the United States and make the stuff here. It's a matter of national security. And again, where has Bush the dad been? Where has Clinton been? Where has George W. Bush been? Where was Obama? And where has been Trump? At the outset of this administration, he was warned, apparently, that there was going to be a pandemic. So rather than tweeting and beating your chest about the stock market, and he can't do that anymore, he should have been working on that. And frankly, the buck stops on his desk too. As much as I love him, as a personal matter, I can't endorse him as head of Freedom Watch, but I want him to win because the alternative is so much worse. Yeah. And now the Democrats are suggesting that we nationalize industries. If we work our way into a socialist, Soviet-style control of the economy, we'll never get back to being capitalist.
Larry, that's it right there. Isn't that what's happening? I mean, here's another bailout. How often can we have these, once in a lifetime events where these billions of dollars that clearly the government doesn't have, they're just printing up money and handing it to the airlines? Why don't they allow these airlines to go out of business and consolidate and cut the service and make it more expensive to fly and just let capitalism work and let the industry deal with whatever's going to happen? I mean, he's talking about bailing out the airlines. He's talking about bailing out the casinos. I have to tell you, Larry, this notion of bailing out the casino, it makes me sick. You ever lose money in a casino and ask them if they might give it back to you?
I'll tell you what also makes me sick. Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, I've made no mistake. I don't like Sean Hannity. When I ran Judicial Watch, he lied to me repeatedly. He's a dishonest individual. He's a slumlord in Atlanta. He bought a lot of stuff at government expense with government loans under, Department of Housing and Urban Development. And then he throws blacks out of his thing. I mean, he claims he's a conservative. He's not conservative. He's a two-faced hack. And when he gets out there and starts running interference without any criticism of what the president's doing, he's not doing the country a service. He's boosting his ratings, and he's lying to the American people. And other people are doing the same thing. Now, I want this president to succeed. I support him personally. Freedom Watch has been defending him now for 3 years. He associates with unsavory people like Roger Stone, Manafort, Rick Gates. They probably have frozen me out of communicating with him. I'm not resentful of that, but he hangs with the wrong people. Now, he's got to wake up, okay? And it's time that he realized he can't turn this country into a socialist state. He's doing what Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and the rest of them want to do. You can't do that. So hold China accountable. Get some cojones and hold them accountable. Stop the tweets. Hold them accountable. And today he says, I don't hold them accountable. Swear to God he said that. And,
Larry,
that's not right. Now you're going to hear
world.
Now tonight you're going to hear the bullshit on Hannity, okay, of how great this is. I'm tired of Hannity's bullshit. Turn it off. Get to work.
So, Larry, you're saying a lot of really important things, and I agree with you. The socialism aspect of this seems to me like it's a very sophisticated social engineering campaign being executed by the Marxist socialist subversion that we've been hearing about for decades. We've been hearing, people who are dialed in have been hearing a lot more about it lately. We know that socialist Marxists and jihadis have joined together. We know that Phil Haney was pivotal in the Holy Land Foundation trial. He gave testimony, including his observations of this document, the memorandum that Laura's told us all about. And here we see Ilhan Omar proudly tweeting that she has introduced the bill to give $1,000 to every American and $500 to every child. This is socialism in Congress.
Now, wait a second. Trump says that's not enough. Yesterday he said it's going to be much bigger than that. Okay, he's one-upping Omar. He's buying the election. That's what he's doing. He's not going to buy it that way. People are going to see through that. And he's got to wake up and sober up, He's lucid, thank God. So he has a chance of sobering up. Joe Biden doesn't. He's gone. Okay, But here's the thing, is that we have to start being honest with the American people. And to say that the taxpayer is going to bail all this out, you can see, Wall Street heard what he said yesterday and today. It's still sinking faster than Iraq. We're going into the 1700s probably by the end of the day. We will have lost more than 30%. It'll be closer to 40%, if not today, by tomorrow morning. And each time the president goes out there and says, I'm going to declare war, I'm spending trillions, this is a crisis. Gee, I did a great job in shutting the border from China before, but now this is what I'm going to do. He's scaring the hell out of people, and it's making it worse. So just do your job. Now, this is, look at Governor Andrew Cuomo. I mean, the guy is a sleazeball, okay? His dad was too, but he's very articulate. He's very smart, much smarter than his brother Chris Cuomo, I might add, on CNN. He's not an idiot either. But he's auditioning to be president. What he's saying is Biden will probably collapse by the time of the general election, assuming we have an election. That can maybe be called off too. But he's auditioning. He's probably, I'm going to make a prediction right now. He's going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party for president by the time this thing's over. Because you know what? He is articulate. And he's handling this in a way
Joe Biden.
That's rational. And not Biden, Andrew Cuomo.
Oh.
Andrew Cuomo. Yeah. And he's very impressive on TV. He's a fraud. He's a phony. That's what he is. But he's going to wind up potentially being the next president of the United States with a female vice presidential pick, maybe Kamala Harris, God forbid.
Oh,
so
come on. That's never going to happen.
Well, she is now the favorite to be that. And look at Biden said, and I have nothing against having an African-American president or vice president or whatever, but not Kamala Harris. Yeah. Kamala Harris is another political hack, but that's what they want. Biden said, I want a black female as my vice presidential
Well,
pick.
He's talking about Michelle Obama, isn't he, if he says that?
Maybe he is. Maybe he's talking about Stacey Abrams. I don't know. But that's not the way you pick a vice president, okay? You don't pick them on the basis of race, color, creed, or religion. You just don't do that. That's, where we're headed in this country. It's ridiculous.
So,
but
Larry,
anyway, look, I'm upset today because I want this president to succeed. I want him to be reelected. I say that personally. I'm not telling people who to vote for as head of Freedom Watch, but he's throwing it all away, and he should shut the heck up and get on with it. He's not doing the country any favors by saying, I'm going to declare war on this, and all the other measures that he's doing to empty out the U.S. Treasury. Make China pay. Make China pay. Join our class action lawsuit by going to freedomwatchusa.org, and please contribute. Whatever you have, it helps, because we're going to have to hire a lot of people here, and we're the only ones that'll do it. We're the only ones that'll do it.
So, Larry, another side effect, for lack of a better term, of this viral outbreak, alleged viral outbreak, is that Joe Biden won the Arizona primary. How many people could have possibly voted if everybody is locked down in their house?
Well, it's probably mostly early voting in Arizona, Florida, and Illinois. That's probably where it came from, I would suspect.
I mean, isn't this convenient,
We'll probably have a presidential election that'll be handled the same way, I suspect. And that opens up the possibility. If you thought there was fraud in the last election, I think it was fraud on the Democrat side mostly, but can you imagine the fraud now that can take place with electronic voting with your computer? That's what's going to happen.
So they're going to rush some untested system on the computer for everybody to vote by November. And despite the fact that for a long, long time, people have been saying that these electronic methods can be compromised, they're just going to rush that in on the basis that there's a virus?
That's right. Well, my home state of Florida went back to a paper ballot. And even they have loopholes because you can vote by mail. In California, you can vote 3 times. I mean, they send you the thing in the mail. You can go into the polling place and they say, do you want to vote electronically, or can we give you another ballot? So you can vote 3 times. I think the president was right. He won the popular vote between New York and California in 2016. I mean, the fraud is rampant in our electoral system. And my former group goes after dead people. That just scratches the surface. It's the live people that are really the problem here. I mean, they're voting 3 times in California and New York and other states.
Yeah. And people can go to freedomwatchusa.org to learn more about all of that. The other thing, Larry, is, today we've got our simulcast working on the Freedom Watch YouTube channel. So in addition to viewing our conversation right now on the Jason Goodman YouTube channel and the Crowdsource the Truth 2 backup YouTube channel, viewers of Freedom Watch can also go on YouTube and watch the video. If you're not yet subscribed to Freedom Watch, please go over there and subscribe. Larry and I have been observing some of the things that YouTube is doing to videos that include Larry Klayman and his statements and his analyses and opinions. And YouTube doesn't seem to like you, Larry.
No, and that's a badge of honor. That's like being called ugly by a frog. Okay, but I've sued YouTube on several occasions. I sued YouTube and Google with the rest of the social media companies for both Freedom Watch and also for Laura Loomer. That's now in the appellate court in the District of Columbia. And I've sued them in other capacities as well. And of course, several months ago, they pulled down all of our YouTube postings for the last many years because I said I was going to bring a citizens grand jury, which I will, against Joe Biden and accused him of taking bribes from the Ukraine. They obviously were throwing their lot with someone who they thought will be the next president of the United States. And let me add this. With what's going on right now, if Biden holds up, he probably will be the next president of the United States. That's super scary. The other night when he had the debate with Bernie Sanders, they must have shot him up with adrenaline or something because he was semi-lucid. He was well dressed. He had a lot of makeup. The CNN was helping him out by taking pictures of him from afar so you couldn't look up close to see all of his Botox and everything else. And Bernie Sanders looked like he was about ready to collapse. So, he's not an impressive figure. And when you see the two of them on stage together without the other candidates, Bernie really stands out as being basically a physical wreck. So now Biden's a mental wreck. I don't know what's going on with his brain, but he must have some kind of dementia or onset of Alzheimer's. But they jacked him up on something. And he was fairly lucid. So if you put him on the stage with Trump, with this crisis, if it's continuing, and it will be continuing, frankly, I think as of today, he probably wins. And that's really frightening.
Larry, there's a lot of people in the comments right now who feel that the coronavirus outbreak could be some sort of planned psychological operation intended to distract people and to destroy the economy that Trump has built and to basically shoehorn Joe Biden in there. A lot of viewers are leaving us comments that indicate that they think that President Trump was actually getting close to draining the swamp. He had avoided impeachment. He had defeated the fake Russia hoax. His allies, like Dr. Corsi and now it seems perhaps General Flynn, have overcome, for the most part, a lot of these sort of corrupt prosecutions that were brought against them. What about the possibility that this was a planned incident, that someone might have caused it?
Let's go backwards here. With Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr, he wasn't close to draining the swamp. Okay, I know he has good intentions, but he wasn't close to draining the swamp. With Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, and Rick Gates around you, you have the swamp around you. That's not true with General Flynn and some others, of course, who are good men. But that's not the case, unfortunately. But I do believe that the Chinese, either by design or negligently, are in fact destabilizing this country to the degree, economically and politically, that it will serve their ends. And of course, Russia is helping out with, their oil policy with Saudi Arabia. The oil market has crashed, and they now see the United States on the run. They see us on our knees. We will prevail. God's on our side. We will prevail like the ancient Hebrews, Israelites, and Christians prevailed, and we will win. But we have to change course right now. We have to hold those accountable that deserve to be held accountable. And I'm not just talking about the Comeys and the McCabe's. And of course, I often said I went after Clinton not for political reasons when I was running Judicial Watch and thereafter. I wanted to hold him accountable. It was not to get him out of office in terms of a political reason. He should have been out of office because he's a criminal and a crook. But the fact is that what the Democrats did during this last election, or this last period, with the witch hunts with Trump, had the same effect as going after Clinton back in the 1990s. We took our eye off the ball. And while we were busy with Clinton and his 40 scandals, Osama bin Laden had another idea. I used to have a line which said, as Clinton was messing around with Monica Lewinsky, it was the American people who were really getting screwed. Okay, which is true. We took our eye off the ball. Okay,
Yeah.
and then now we have this. We've been taking our eye off the ball, and we're getting our comeuppance. And I think God is sending us a message here: get your act together. or you're going to go the way of Sodom and Gomorrah. You're going to go the way of the Egyptians, in Exodus, leading up to their Jews fleeing out of bondage, out of slavery from Egypt. He's done this numerous times in world history. And I believe that God is trying to send us a message, shape up or ship out right now.
Now, Larry, let's go back to Governor Cuomo for a moment. He gave this press conference the other day where he was talking about the hospitals in New York City being just overstressed, already at capacity, not able to handle these incoming patients that he expected. This is actually a new press conference that was just out 4 hours ago. Now, I've only visited 2 hospitals in New York City, but they were 2 very prominent ones. And not only were there no EMTs, ambulance drivers, doctors, hospital administrators, police officers, or any hospital employee who had direct firsthand knowledge of a COVID-19 patient. Nobody has seen any of them there. The ambulances were all parked there. Wouldn't we expect that a viral pandemic of sufficient severity to shut down the economy of the economic center of the nation, the most populous city in the country, one of the most populous cities in the world, wouldn't you expect a viral pandemic of that description to just clog the hospitals and have it seem like an emergency at every hospital? Doesn't it seem weird to you that the ambulances were all sitting there and no EMT I've spoken to for days is aware of a coronavirus patient?
Yeah. Well, we've said perceptions become realities. Now, Cuomo, who's a whore, I wrote a book, Whores, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment. He's not in it. He'll be in my next book, Whores 2, is that Cuomo is trying to build this crisis up bigger than it is in terms of New York City. It is a big crisis. It is a pandemic. It is terrible. But he's now trying to put himself in a position where he will be the next nominee for president of the United States in 2020. That's what he's doing. And he calmed himself down today. If you see it, he was much more reserved because he took a lot of heat over that. But the reality is this guy's extremely articulate, like his father was, Mario Cuomo, former governor of New York, and his brother, Chris Cuomo.
They look almost like twins.
They're almost like twins. Chris is a little better looking, of course, but they're very articulate people. And he made a lot of sense today. And what he's doing is he's one-upping the president of the United States. He's saying, I can be president here. And I'll tell you something, if Biden falls flat on his face, I think that he will be the nominee of the Democrat Party.
I'm not sure I like that, because what he was saying in his press conference to me just reeked of signaling to pharmaceutical companies and medical equipment companies. He was talking about the FDA getting out of the way so that tests and various things could be fast-tracked. Now, I mean, again, the test, we've been seeing articles since that press conference. John Rappaport had a very detailed article pointing to serious deficiencies with the test. And if the test is what's telling us who does or doesn't have it, and the test itself is totally flawed and inaccurate, doesn't that open the door for a tremendous amount of fraud and the ability for...
It may, but I agree with it, Jason. But on the other side of the coin, I have a libertarian side of me, is that if you want to take anything that you think is going to help you in a crisis, you should be able to do that. And the same FDA, who I used to represent before AIDS came on the scene, before HIV, as a Justice Department lawyer, both in a defense capacity and a prosecutorial capacity, is overly slow in approving new drugs. And in fact, a lot of people who were gay, lesbian, and whatever died because they couldn't get medication fast enough. There was a movie about that with Matthew McConaughey, I think, which was accurate.
Oh yeah, the Dallas Buyers Club.
Yeah, I myself say that if you want to take something, for whatever ailment you may have, if you believe it's going to help you, cancer, whatever, a lot of people go to Mexico for that, for what they can't get here. You should be allowed to do that.
Haven't they just passed a law like the right to try or something like that? Where people can try experimental. Yeah, a friend of mine from grade school who became a lawyer had an intestinal, some sort of, problem I think he was born with or something like that. and there was a treatment that he wasn't allowed to use because it hadn't been approved by the FDA. And I'm pretty sure, as a lawyer, he was pretty involved in getting this thing passed. This right to try law, I think, allows people to try experimental medical treatments in the event that they have life-threatening diseases and no other alternative. That being said, medical professionals have told me that, and the president himself has made a number of remarks, that this vaccine that they're anticipating has been developed faster than any other vaccine in history. Medical professionals have scoffed at the possibility that a viable vaccine could be developed so quickly. The whole thing just really seems like a flim-flam.
You know who already has one is Israel. Okay, Israel's far advanced on this. They obviously did what we should have done after 9/11, and they realized they could be subject to a bioweapons attack. So they developed vaccines with regard to, biological weapons very similar to COVID-19. And Israel may make off like a bandit on this. They have very fine doctors over there and other people in the technical area. But we didn't do all of that. And while now we're in a crisis and we have to think about that, let's not make the same mistake that we made after 9/11 and be complacent and listen to politicians who tell us all is well. I've said this before. I was a French literature major at Duke University. The book that influenced me the most, there were two. One was Candide, or Candide, if you want to say it in English, by Voltaire. Another was The Stranger by Albert Camus, an existentialist, C-A-M-U-S. I urge people to read it. Explains the way I think, in large part. And Voltaire wrote about this guy named Candide, who had a mentor named Dr. Pangloss, a philosopher. And every time things would happen that were bad, the philosopher would say, all is for the best. Tout est pour le meilleur in French. All's for the best. And at the end of the book, Voltaire, who believed there was no rationality to the universe, said we have to give our own rationality to the universe. And the moral was cultivate your garden. Well, Candide went off to cultivate his garden. And that's what we've got to do, okay, is that we got to take matters into our own hands right now and make some sense of all of this and stop relying on government to do it for us, stop relying on our politicians. Yes, government plays a big role in health, safety, and welfare, but take it with a grain of salt. And that's why we at Freedom Watch are taking matters into our own legal hands. Now, the other one, and we can talk about that someday in greater depth, was The Stranger, where an Algerian, an Arab, was convicted of murder because he didn't cry at the funeral of his mother, okay? And, the jury heard that and thought he must be callous, must be a murderer. That's our legal system, by the way, in a nutshell, is that's the way things are administered to in the courts these days. Little having to do with the facts and the law, but extraneous factors that influence the decisions of judges, including their own bias and prejudices. So we put those two things together, and that's the philosophy of yours truly in terms of the world. I'm also religious, so I would call myself a religious existentialist. God helps those who help themselves. That's my view. And now we've got to help ourselves. And I believe he's sending us a message. I believe he's cleaning house to some degree. And those people who survive are going to be the ones who follow his stricture, his way, whether you're Jewish or Christian or anything, or whether you're even religious at all. There are certain tenets in society that are embodied, in my view, in the Ten Commandments. And you must live by those, whether you're religious or not, if you want to be a good person and further, what we're all about. And unfortunately, our politicians lie to us continuously. And excuse me for that.
It's all right.
And frankly, you can't believe a word the government says anymore. And that's the frightening part of this whole thing, is that Trump's got to be very careful about what he says, because he's lost a lot of credibility. Not all is well. He is not Dr. Pangloss. It is not well. And that he just discovered it a few days ago is troubling. So
you didn't appreciate when the president was saying that this is being overreacted to and that perhaps it's not as, being reported. You think that we're more on track?
Again, excuse the French. No, I mean, there's got to be a middle ground here. So you can't say all is well, don't worry about it, and then a few days later say we're in the deep shit. Okay? So you lose your credibility. you lose your credibility. The president has little credibility right now. He does. That's a fact. And I want him to succeed. I want him to succeed.
Let me take you back to this vaccine development, because again, I'm hearing certain things that are being said by Cuomo, by Dr. Fauci, even the president himself, that just to me are red flags that we're gonna be forced to take these vaccines. I don't know if you're familiar with Del Bigtree and the film Vaxxed, which goes into great detail about a whistleblower within the CDC who provided Del with documents that were from the CDC's own research about serious health concerns related to a Merck DPT vaccine that was covered up by the CDC. So this documentary was removed from Amazon.com by Adam Schiff. And frankly, it's a very well-researched documentary that contains testimony from MDs and scientists at the CDC, documented evidence and all kinds of things. And rather than putting out his own counterpoint to any of the points in here, Adam Schiff, like a book-burning, goose-stepping, totalitarian scumbag, which I think he is, he wants this not even available to be read or debated or looked at. What do you think about the danger from a vaccine that's developed so quickly, Larry?
Again, Jason, I think it should be one's individual choice whether to take it or not. It should not be forced upon you. But if it comes to that, and those people don't want to take it, and there's some indication that they're ill, then they will need to be quarantined and provision made that they can continue on, with their life and making money and supporting their family. But yes, in times of national emergency, you can't let people running around infecting people. Look at what's going on with millennials right now. I mean, I often joke that my dog has a bigger vocabulary than most millennials, and it's probably true. They're congregating on the beaches in South Florida, in my home state. They're interacting with each other. It's irresponsible. It's out of control. And yes, you need to curtail something like that in times of actual national emergency. And we don't know the full extent of it yet. So you just can't say that people should not be able to take the vaccine and walk away. I don't think they should be forced to take it. No, I wouldn't want to be forced to take it. But there needs to be some provision to isolate them and let them try to continue on, earning a living, eating, and that kind of thing for the national good.
Right.
And that's where government comes in. That's a legitimate use of government.
Right. And while our government and its various employees have become enthralled with socialism and giving everybody everything for free, I believe it was Mike Pence who announced that says right there on Fox behind you that New York State has the highest number of coronavirus cases in the United States. So perhaps there's a reasonable explanation as to why the most populous city in the state with the most number of cases, so far no EMT or ambulance driver has seen anybody or knows anything firsthand. So that's interesting. But Larry, if you were driving around LA next week and the Rite Aids and the Walgreens and whatnot had signs that said come in and get your free coronavirus vaccine, would you personally choose to take one?
I would have to evaluate, what the situation was, what tests were being made, whether people took it before and whether they lived or died or got sick. I'm generally not in favor of vaccines. I don't take them for shingles. Doctors have said, Larry, take one for shingles. You may be exposed to that. I think I had a flu shot once in my entire life. I don't particularly care for it myself, so I'd have to make that decision, but that's my decision.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't take it, and if I was in a group that was at risk, the government would be right saying, hey, you can take a trip to the Catskill Mountains and hang out there for a while until this thing blows over.
We've been hearing a lot in New York City about the possibility of this shelter-in-place program that they've been bandying about. And it seems that de Blasio wants to do it, but he's been getting pushback from Andrew Cuomo. De Blasio is an extremely dumb guy, in my estimation. I don't even understand how this would be enforced. We've got something between 8 and 9 million people in New York City, and I think there's 30,000 some odd NYPD officers. Are they just going to start arresting people if they're not inside their apartments? I mean, what does this dope have planned?
I'll tell you something. De Blasio, as dumb as he is, makes the other socialists look like geniuses. Ilham Omar, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, Bernie, the rest of them. But he said something recently which is really dangerous, and it was picked up by other leftists. He wants to nationalize United States industries. And if that happens, uh, Katie barred the door.
The country's over.
Yeah, the country's over. Country's over. We will have accomplished something that the Soviet Union could never have done. And nobody succeeded at doing, whether it was Cuba, Venezuela, or elsewhere. This state of emergency is being used by the left to take total government control, to squeeze God out of our life. We will be worshiping at the altar of government. We'll be back. We will have arrived at Atlas Shrugged of Ayn Rand and George Orwell's 1984. And look at what Israel's doing now. And I love Israel, as I love this country, is that they're now using their mass surveillance to spy on people with regard to the virus. It's very dangerous.
It's really terrible. Larry, I remember as a young boy in the 1980s being, I guess, propagandized at this point, being shown images of, citizens in the Soviet Union waiting in line for bread, waiting in line for toilet paper with the consistency of newspaper. New York has turned into this week. I see people waiting down the block to get into Trader Joe's, the hope that they might get toilet paper today, and miracle of miracles, there might be meat there today. People are now eagerly awaiting their government check from the jihadi infiltrator Ilhan Omar so that they can take their $1,000 government pittance that's intended to replace their job and their business from now until August. Even if it was $10,000, why are people anxious to be given money by the government to go be told what vaccines they need to take in order to wait in line to possibly receive toilet paper and bread?
And I can assure you that many people will take that money and spend it on alcohol and drugs and other things. During times of crisis, the alcohol industry does pretty well. So does the drug industry. And there's no telling how that money will be spent. And that's why the money should not come from our treasury, from your pocket, from my pocket. It should come from the communist Chinese.
But it's still just giving out money to people. I'm concerned with the whole entire approach to this thing. We seem to have moved so far away from any kind of evidence-based approach to making any sort of decision whatsoever. We get these international social engineering campaigns, like somebody faking a gas attack in Syria that prompts a missile launch. I mean, what if it turns out, Larry, that this is the biggest orchestrated event in history, and that it's been orchestrated by a criminal organization, a supranational criminal organization that includes the Clinton Foundation as a financing element. And this is their, ninth inning play to knock out Donald Trump, to knock out patriots who want to make America great again, who want to make America independent of the Chinese economy and stamp out globalism.
Hey, you just hit on something. Who is it that bribed the Clintons to the hilt in the 1990s? I was the one that triggered the Chinese scandal. The Chinese, they bribed Hillary and Bill to the hilt. Okay, I represented Johnny Chung, who, came around. But he said, the White House was like a turnstile. Put in $50,000 and you can get access. That was from Chinese intelligence sources that money came from. He didn't know it, but that's where it came. And then, of course, Joe Biden, he's been bribed by the Chinese, too. Right behind the Ukraine scandal was China that was bribing him and his son. So these are the people you want in power. It's very conceivable that this thing's been furthered. And we know that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And that, that these groups do get together. I mean, we talked about the assassination of Kennedy, possibly the CIA, possibly the mafia, possibly Cuba, coming together with a common purpose to get rid of JFK, who was considered to be weak on communism by the CIA, and of course, had put a thorn in the side of the Soviet Union with the Cuban Missile Crisis. We thought. We found out later that wasn't totally true, but who knows? Who knows? But one thing is for sure: we're on our back right now. God forbid we have a major war. How are we going to pay for that? And how are we going to defend ourselves? Also, when the American people are in panic, we're in the deep. You know what? Right now.
Yeah.
And I blame every president for it. And I blame the American people for going along la-di-da. I blame the Sean Hannitys of the world for telling us things are okay, night in and night out, and justice is around the corner. I blame the federal judges for not enforcing the laws in this country. There's a lot of people to blame. So, yeah, God's sending us a message. We better take stock right now.
Larry, the other thing that you and I have discussed lately is, separate from the virus, this concept of plausibility within the context of lawsuits and the unfair dismissal of a lawsuit that you've brought on behalf of Dr. Corsi against Robert Mueller and the Department of Justice. I want to ask you this, just in our last few minutes here.
That wasn't the dismissal that ended the case. That case is going to be filed elsewhere. But one of these hack Trump judges that he put in, he doesn't even know who he appointed. These were recommended to him by the Washington establishment. And this judge on the D.C. U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, Timothy Kelly, is a complete hack. Mm-hmm. And he didn't want cases with Corsi in his courtroom, didn't want cases with me in his courtroom. So he sends them to West Texas. He sends them to New York. He sends them to Florida. He had little to no basis for doing that. And this is what we're dealing with today. This guy's a complete hack, Timothy Kelly. And there's another one up there named McFadden, who's not that much different. So don't be fooled when the president tells you he's got great judges. Or they don't have great judges. They have establishment hacks, by and large, that were put in. They're almost as bad as what Obama and Clinton put in. Honestly, I'm telling you that the lawyer, I'll probably be retaliated by these judges for saying it, but the American people need to know it.
Well, this guy's from Glen Cove, which, if people have seen the movie North by Northwest, is a great scene that takes place in Glen Cove. And if you haven't seen it yet, I definitely encourage people to watch that film while under lockdown. It's one of my favorite films ever.
Apparently went to Duke University. Let's see, 69, so he's 18 years younger than I. He wasn't there when I was there, so he was there after Duke turned into the Berkeley of the South. So,
not to focus too much on the individual judges, I want to focus on this concept of plausibility, because as I understand it in the context of a federal suit, if I allege that Larry Klayman broke into my house and stole something, that's plausible in the sense that you could break into a house and steal something. Now, you'd have an opportunity to defend yourself. You were never in New York. There's no evidence that you did this, you did do whatever. But from a plausibility standpoint, that is something that I could allege in a suit or in some sort of charge against a person. If I were to sue you for being Big Bird or something like that, or for being a space alien, that could be dismissed as implausible because on the surface, it just doesn't seem like it's within the realm of practical possibility to occur, right? Is that essentially?
That's right. Yes, and that's why our founding fathers gave us the jury system. They didn't trust the judges of King George III, who were rubber stamps and became yes men, and were exercising either their own political predilections or that of the king. Now these judges have become the king, and they take out of context in a case styled Bell Atlantic versus Womby, a very complex antitrust case where the Supreme Court said that the claims in that case were not plausible as a matter of antitrust law. They take that out of context, and on their own, they now say, I don't consider something plausible. And that's why the biggest threat to this country, short of the coronavirus, are most federal judges. Okay, they think they're God, they're there for life, and they have immunity, they think. Now, we need to remove that because they need to be held to account. And the Judiciary Committee in the House doesn't impeach anybody. One of the last people impeached, as I've said many times, was Alice E. Hastings from Miami, a federal judge. He was impeached for bribery, and then he ran for Congress, and he's been there ever since. He's happier than a pig. You know what?
Yeah.
So this is what we're dealing with. Without a legal system, we are exposed to the tyranny of the other two branches of government and ourselves. And without a legal system, we are left defenseless. And we have no legal system to speak of right now. And it's a sham.
It is. And as you've just described, there's a certain degree of margin, a certain amount of leeway these judges have to interpret the concept of something like plausibility. But within the context of what it is supposed to be, I want to ask you, just for our final question here, is it plausible, Larry, that just extreme, intense international criminals like the Clintons, people who would buy blood from infected prisoners and sell it to hemophiliacs in Canada and elsewhere around the world to spread viruses,
People who are the
who
number one
engage in
suspects.
all kinds of evil schemes to steal money from people and take advantage of people. Would it be plausible within the realm of something that could happen that such an organization could identify a young scientist in China and cultivate and groom that scientist such that they could infiltrate a lab, perhaps in Canada, which maybe has less security than the United States, maybe somebody like Frank Giustra or some other associate in Canada has the ability to influence this lab, maybe some rich person who's donating to their foundation. Maybe we could find someone who could get in there, get the virus, maybe they know they're doing this, maybe they don't know they're doing this, transport it to China, and have something that's done, an event, a deliberate action that's taken, not by a government of a country or a sovereign nation, but by essentially an international criminal organization of a level of sophistication that is not yet fully understood by the public and has never before been seen in history. Would that be plausible?
When it comes to Hillary Clinton, anything's plausible. Okay, anything is. She's a cold-hearted, evil witch, plain and simple, who furthers her own interests above everyone else, including her own Democratic Party. So yes, it could happen. And she's so hateful that it could happen. And she thinks to this day that she's going to be the nominee for president in 2020 of the Democratic Party. She believes that in her heart. Bill Clinton, he's off with his women. I think he's probably just kind of having fun. But she's an evil, evil, evil person.
And certainly if she had good reason to believe that evidence or information or something was aligning in such a way that she had serious legal exposure that would either subject her to indictment, incarceration, or exposure that would destroy her legacy and reveal her to be the horrible criminal that people who watch Crowdsource the Truth know her to be, wouldn't it also be plausible that she would say to herself, if I'm going down, I'm taking out the world with me?
Well, yeah, except for one point, Jason. I think it's just, if it happened, if she's behind this in any way, small or otherwise, it would be for the sake thereof. But she knows that our legal system will never take her down. She knows that. And our legal system won't take anybody down, Democrat or Republican, of that degree of so-called prominence. So she knows she's safe.
Larry Klayman has brought a class action lawsuit against the People's Republic of China and various other parties, including the Chinese, the People's Army, and he's got a class action lawsuit that people can join as defendants. If you go to freedomwatchusa.org, you can read the complaint. You can contribute to the fund that is being used to hold the People's Republic of China and the People's Liberation Army accountable for the coronavirus COVID-19 outbreak. Larry, thank you for joining me today. Anything else you'd like to say before we close?
I just want to say one thing. I thank you, Jason, for allowing me to say my piece. I appreciate your points of view. I will always tell the truth. And some things I've said today concerning President Trump, probably people wouldn't expect that Larry Klayman would have said. I do support him. I want him to be reelected in my personal capacity. I want him to succeed. I've been trying to help him for 3 years. I've been trying to give him advice. But the fact is, he's effed up. And now he's got to straighten this thing out. And he bears responsibility along with prior presidents and our government. We cannot trust the government. We have to do it for ourselves. So please join our lawsuit. We'll play our part as we the people. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and do that.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, Larry, they were just showing on the screen behind you the Dow Jones Industrial Average going down and DJI, the Chinese world leader in drones.
Yeah. Let me add one last point. The only reason Fox is on behind me is because there's no alternative. You can't even see a picture from Newswax and know what you're looking at from Newsmax. And secondly, with regard to CNN and MSNBC, I mean, you might as well be watching, the grandma from Cuba.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fidel Castro's press organ. So that's the
Absolutely.
only reason Fox is on. Okay, so
Well, Larry,
but
thanks
but
for
process of elimination,
process of
yep,
elimination. It's the only one left.
it's the only one left.
Thank you for taking time out of your quarantine today, Larry, to speak to us. And I hope that this passes soon and has a minimal impact on you, your family, your legal practice. I haven't mentioned this yet today, but people may not realize in the alternative coronavirus-free universe today, right now, in fact, I would be in Virginia defending myself against an allegedly fake lawsuit. But we're not going to talk about that today. I'll talk to
Right, and
everybody
I might
about that in
add,
the future.
the silver lining in all of this: if all of us perish, the world will be inhabited by dogs who are far superior creatures.
Well said, Larry. And say hello to Beverly the dog. She is a lovely and articulate creature who's smarter than a millennial. Larry, thanks for joining me. Thanks everybody
And
for
has a bigger
watching.
vocabulary.
That's right.
Thank you.
We'll be back at 5 p.m. with a special report from John Cullen. He's gone from Vegas to virus, and he's uncovered some alarming statistics that might shock people. Tune in at 5 p.m. for that. Thanks for watching, everybody.